It's my pleasure to be presiding over the final panel today. Unfortunately, one of our speakers has been unable to attend, but fortunately we still have an extraordinary storyteller in the ambassador from Bolivia, and I will pass to him shortly. One of the requests, though, from within the room was to explain to people how TISA might end up in the WTO and therefore become an issue of concern for developing countries especially that may not be signatories to the TISA itself. And so I'm going to give a very quick explanation of one of those ways. But I want to follow the pattern of the advertising for the day. And for those who are interested in stories about how trade and services might affect aspects of people's lives, there is a book that I wrote several years ago called Serving Whose Interests: The Political Economy of Trade and Services Agreements. And it has technical stuff. It has also lots of case studies about how it might work in real life. And so we just thought we might introduce you to that. Oh, it's not on. Okay. We don't know precisely how TISA might enter into the WTO, but we do know some things. According to the agreement establishing the World Trade Organization, the plurilateral agreements, which appear in Annex 4, can be added to with another plurilateral agreement, but that requires consensus at the biennial meeting of ministers. And at present, if you look at the resistances around the gaps, you would think that adding the plurilateral might be difficult to achieve. One of the strategies that has been discussed is in an EU paper dated 2012, which suggested the ways that TISA participants might proceed. The first was to develop 4 parts to the TISA text. There would be a central pillar of text rules, which would be based on the relevant GATS rules. That is, not all of the GATS rules, the ones seen by the very good friends as being relevant. Then there would be annexes on specific issues or sectors such as ICT, e-commerce, possibly domestic regulation. Thirdly, there would be an understanding that would set out the rules according to which, for example, commitments were made, the standstill provisions and the ratchet provisions and so on. And then there would be the schedules of commitments that the individual countries might make, and presumably something on dispute settlement. What the EU suggested was that this process should be negotiated first amongst the current 23 participants, maybe some others, as a regional trade agreement under the GATS Article 5. Additional participants should then be invited to sign on to the TISA to the point that they reach a critical mass of countries who are members of WTO. Then the process of multilateralizing it, bringing it into the WTO, could involve the TISA members voluntarily updating their schedules in the GATS, and in the column that refers to additional commitments, writing into that column and TISA, seeking to get the annexes to TISA accepted by consensus in the WTO, but if there is not consensus, again, inscribing those in that third column so they are adopted by the TISA countries as part of the WTO rules, and query what then would happen to the irrelevant rules and whether they would seek to have those removed from the GATS or would just leave them lying there, but focusing on the new rules for those who signed up to it. Now, we understand there has been an attempt by, well, what some of us see as an attempt by the TISA participants to already insert TISA into the WTO environment by reporting to the Committee on Trade and Services on what is happening in TISA, although we understand they don't actually report any details of what is happening. But by putting that onto the agenda of the WTO committee, it is already kind of integrating it into the WTO process. So that is just one possibility, but undoubtedly there are others, and there will be important resistances that will need to come from those in the WTO who have been standing firm on these issues. Now it is my enormous pleasure to invite Angelica.
Fernando Rosales. Angelica sick.
Fernando. I was wondering. I thought the gender was wrong.
From Bolivia.
Yes. And I do know him. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's just the end of the day. Okay. It is the impersonator of Angelica Navarro Llanos, Fernando Rosales from Bolivia, who have played an incredibly important role in the trade and services discussions in the WTO context. And so we are delighted to have you and excited to hear what you have to say.